this is Orc Tactical Team, this is Maloria, and what we're going to be talking about today is actually something a little bit longer and something going a little bit farther back. And really what it goes back to is the start of 8th edition. And really when I started looking at the rumors and what it was all about, right away I just said to everyone that ever asked on the forums or whatever to say, you know what, this edition is just going to be about bigger is better. Between Steadfast and the new way about how you figure out who wins and loses and the new effects of terrain, you know what, just screw the way that we used to play. Just take big blocks, bigger is better. You know, don't waste your time with this little throwaway units. It's just going to get killed. Give your opponent the win. Bigger is better. I just kept on repeating that over and over again. And so what this episode here is going to be all about is bigger still better? Is that after years and years of playing, new books, new FAQs, has this really changed, or does Malorian still say bigger is better? And I guess the first part of this to really say is yes, in a way. And let's really go and try and touch on this. Because I really think you have to kind of break this down. And I really think the first spot where you have to begin talking about this is to be talking about just regular pickup games. Where you take up your rule book and you go play a game with your buddy. Now, when you do this, you go and you put down D6 plus 4 terrain, and when you look at the terrain you get from this, you're going to be getting, woods, because it's the average thing you're going to be getting, and you're going to get a few things that might matter, and, most of it is just fairly small stuff. Then you're going to be taking turns going back and forth. And if either one of you has something that you don't like, it's going to go off on the side of the board. You're not going to see it. And so even though you might have an average of 7 pieces of terrain, usually the stuff that's actually bigger or has some sort of an effect on it, you've now had either person saying, screw it, I don't want you getting frenzy, it's on the side of the board. I don't want this big piece of terrain in the middle, it's going on the side of the board. Screw this river, it's going on the side of the board. And so really when you look at it from that part, this is where hordes excel. This is where you can be taking blocks of 100 Chaos Warriors and just say, screw you, I'm marching up, you will never get these points, and I'm just going to go and grind through whatever you have. I'm so big that with my ranks, you're not going to take Steadfast away from me. I'm so big and there's so many of these hordes that you can't really get to my flank. If you do get to my flank, I'm just going to be able to reform and face you. And this is just big old grind hammer, and that's the way you do it. It's boring, but that's the way 8th edition is. However, this really changes once you start going to tournaments. And the reason for that is the fact that when you go to tournaments, that's not the way they're going to be actually doing terrain. You're not going to have terrain organizers that are saying, screw this terrain, I'm going to go and just put it to the side. Even if you have a tournament that you have fewer pieces of terrain, even say like 3 per table, you're going to be seeing these more centralized. And so something where you might just have a building, a hill, and a forest. Well, those things will be right here in the middle. And really, to be honest, hills in 8th are nothing. But, if you got this building somewhere in the center, it can make a huge deal in the way that you're playing your game. Having that one building so that things have to kind of cycle it around, and you can be redirecting things into the tower to make sure they don't want to overrun, or if they do, they're stuck there, or who knows, maybe they're frenzied, so they have to overrun into it, and then they have to spend another turn refacing around in order to try and deal with their thing. And then of course you have the other tournaments where they're going to be having more terrain, and then all of a sudden if you have these multiple buildings and things up, it really changes the way the game plays. This isn't just a straight out of the book, playing with your buddies by the rules. This is now set terrain, which vastly changes the way you play the game. If you go into these things with a few big hordes, you know what's going to happen? Look at my battle reports. You're going to see what happens. If you go up against people that are skilled and real well versed in the way of how to use these, where all of a sudden there's eagles redirecting you into a building, it's just going to wreck your day. And it's one of those things where it's not really the meta of the book, it's the meta of how it really transforms and how it's used in application in a tournament. And so that's where you have to kind of really look at it, because for the most part, even if you are more looking at your general play games, a lot of times you are also doing these at-home games to practice for a tournament. And so really, if you're doing that, you should be then changing your terrain to mirror the type of terrain you're going to be seeing in the tournament. And so what this really means then is that instead of just taking these couple of big hordes and moving up, all of a sudden, like we said, it's very important to take chaff to go and redirect. And with this, that really comes down to something that also gets really critical in these games. Of course, as these hordes got really, really big, one of the things that people went shooting for is, okay, you have, let's just say for craziness, 100 Chaos Warriors. I am not realistically going to be getting the points for those 100 Chaos Warriors, but I can be getting points from your characters far, far easier, be it through death magic or in combat, just making sure to go in and focusing on that one guy, or something like Dwellers that is just going to force tests all over. And even if the odds are with you and you're going to be passing on average, well, if I Dwellers that unit several times, there's a good chance that those characters will finally die. Of course, there's some examples where this really doesn't come into effect. Say if you're the whole high elf thing where you can be having the banner of no magic on me and all this stuff. But for the most part, that's a really big part of the game where people are now shooting more to kill your characters. And this even goes to things like the witch hunters and stuff, where now you're having these more specialists that are built in that have a lot of good ways to kill your characters. And so that's what they're trying to be doing while they're going and redirecting your units. Not only might they be shooting you and slamming down war machines on you, it's also be picking off the character as well. This is happening. And so the way to counter that is that you're going to be having things like archer units to kill the chaff units, or maybe a chariot or something like that, and that's going to be taking those out. And of course now the reverse with that now is, whereas now we're having maybe smaller units so that it's not a big deal if something gets messed up, or even just the fact where hordes can't fit in different areas, well then all of a sudden monsters become a bigger, or a more viable rather, and so you start seeing more monsters, and once you have monsters you start having war machines. And so really when you look at this in tournaments, you're starting to have all these things again. Another big part of this too is that tournaments aren't always using the normal scoring from the book. The whole idea where you need 100 to win. Well, okay, that's fantastic. However, there's other ones, especially with ones going with ETC rules or something like that, where it's broken up into something completely different. Where all of a sudden you're needing, okay, you need to have a difference of this many victory points to get this type of win, and this many victory points to get this win, and blah, 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 blah. This is the whole 20-0 system. And what the 20-0 system then says to you is that you can't really be playing this sort of game where I'm going to be up by 100 and I win, right? Or I'm going to double your victory points, where if you get 0 and I get 100, same thing. It's a massacre. Hooray! But if you're doing one of these things in a tournament where you're going for the 20-0 system, it's completely different. You play a game like this where, okay, I have no chaff and I'm really going to go and work out to get these whatever points I have so that I'm up to 100 points. Well, great. You just won a 12-8 or whatever it works out to be. In the other side, though, maybe you're the person that took the chaff, and now you're losing 200 points in chaff to work things out, but then you scored, maybe you finally destroyed that one horde, or you slowed things up so you could kill that one character, and all of a sudden you, say, get 800 points for them. Boom, that's bigger. Maybe now it's a 16-4 win for them, right? And so the way that dynamic works is completely different because of how it's different from the actual book. So really looking at that, I mean, really, I think from the actual rule book, bigger is still better, and that's really the way to go if you're going to do it by that. But luckily, I mean, as I already admitted, that does get kind of boring when you're just grinding these big units against each other. But when you go to these tournaments where the terrain is different, and now the whole way that everything operates with each other, you're getting to see all these different types of units, and even the way that they might be scored will be different. That now changes everything. Another thing too you see different is the way that you could be seeing for your scenarios. So in a regular game, you got your 6 main scenarios, and that's it. And for the most part, they're very straightforward. There's almost nothing that ever needs you to go to the other side of the board. I mean, I guess if you have somebody that's a gun line, so they're hiding from you, okay, now you have to go to the other side of the board. But for the most part, you're looking for things like Watchtower, where all you have to get to do is get to the center. Or other ones are just really set up so that in different ways you're just fighting in the center. Whether it's dawn attack and it's mixed up deployment, or it's a battle for the pass and it's long ways, or whatever it is, there is no incentive to try and do anything very fancy. I can play my ogre list, I can take my 3 hordes of bulls and whatever. I'm just going to steamroll up. Or I can take what I always take, my orcs. And I'm just going to take my big blocks and steamroll up. Now, all of a sudden, if you're going to tournaments, the scenarios can go and turn this on their head too. Because maybe now, instead of just needing to win, because now there's some tournaments where the objectives don't matter, right? It'll be maybe something simple, where it's like the book, where you just need 100 more victory points for the win, and it might be something saying it too, like if you go and destroy the opponent's biggest unit, then you're going to get an extra 500 victory points or whatever it is. And really these numbers don't matter, because if you destroy their biggest unit, you're going to be winning anyway, and that math doesn't matter. But if you have one of the scenarios that does really matter, or something that's completely separate, so let's say that the way that they work it out is if you get a tie, it's 7 points, and if you get a massacre, it's 14 points. But then every single mission has secondary objectives. So maybe you need to get a unit into the opponent's deployment zone, or maybe you have to get at least 1 flank charge, or 1 rear charge, or any of this stuff that really demands mobility, or something like saying that you need to have a unit at every single table quarter. Well, then all of a sudden, or maybe 1 unit with a banner in every single table quarter. What this does is forces your list to be different, especially if these secondary objectives give you separate points. So maybe it could be something where, haha, I got over 100 points, I doubled your victory points, that's a massacre, right? I get 14 points. Well, maybe the other guy lost, but because of the way that people get the secondaries, maybe the secondaries are worth 5. And if you didn't win with that, okay, you got your 14. Somebody else that got a smaller win, maybe getting 10 points, but they got the secondaries, they're going to get 15, and they beat you. And of course, all these numbers are just loosey-goosey, and it could be whatever. But the main thing I'm trying to get at is that when you go to these tournaments, all of a sudden your list needs to change to handle these different situations. And really, again, too, this could change from tournament to tournament. Not all tournament organizers do this, but I'm starting to see it more and more. And so it really demands you to be changing your list to have more faster elements, more units that are smaller with banners, just to hold these different objectives, because it's coming up more where they're trying to force you to break up the hordes and not have these things. So I guess, again, going back, does Malorian believe that bigger is better? From the book, yes. But in general tournament play, no. I'm starting to turn against that. I'm starting to change up my lists. You guys are going to start seeing it come up here now, or my war machines are back into it. I'm going to be throwing in more redirection units. And I really don't see that changing now for a while. I mean, the big thing is that we had our heydays where people, well, basically listened to me or whoever else and took the big hordes, and it was just hordes on hordes grinding. But now it's slowly changing over. People are realizing about how they can be using these chaff to change things, and tournament organizers are learning how to do that with their rules as well. And just days are different, right? You can't just go into a tournament with a few big hordes and just assume you're going to be destroying everyone. So there you have it, and I hope you liked watching it. Bye.